Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Dr. Kyle Knox. I'm a sports chiropractor in Westlake Village, California. I have a practice here. It's very sports driven. I've traveled around the world and got to work with USA Water Polo. Been around the world and seeing these athletes play. It's amazing on how much demand they put on their bodies, and especially even the amateur to the youth athlete. We're here to talk about the mass suit. It's a tool that has an amazing ability to stimulate the core, call in more power for your sport, and it's just another way we can incorporate more training in a very specific way. I've worked a lot with Olympic athletes, amateur athletes, youth athletes. It's really my true passion, and I'm here to talk a lot about mass suit today. The mass suit is something that came across my practice about 6 months ago. Really got introduced from the owner, Jesse, and we started talking about the benefits. Didn't truly know what it was going to do for my practice or for my athletes until I started putting them in it. And I started seeing some pretty amazing things happen. We're going to talk about that today, a little research I've done, and just overall how the mass suit's going to benefit you as an athlete or someone looking to increase their activity overall. So I have an example here. This is a young water polo player. Something we see a lot in athletics is the lower back or the glutes not firing off properly. So with her, she has a little bit of a sway back. She's not like to use her glutes too much. And you can see by the yellow line I've created that she definitely has a little bit of that lower back sway. So what we've been finding is that with the mass suit, when you put it on, it activates the posterior chain or the back side of your body, so you have to fire off the glutes a lot more. When you do that, you start to notice that your core activates a little bit. You get a little taller in your posture. Your shoulders naturally roll back. And it's pretty exciting to see that as a sports practitioner because we're trying to stimulate that a lot, with our care. So let me show you what happens here in this next picture. We put the suit on, and it may not look like a big change to the, while you're just looking at it, but what I see right away is that her lower back goes from being this kind of sway to having a little bit more activation in the core. She's a little bit more upright. Her shoulders are sitting a lot more natural, and her head is right in line with that shoulder, her ear to the shoulder. Very exciting because, like I said, that sway back, not good for an athlete, especially getting into a movement, water polo player, whatever it is you want to do, that core activation, even in good posture, is so important. So here's another movement that I had her go through, a simple lunge with a little rotation. So what she's doing is she's lunging, and then she's rotating her body around. This is a really neat movement to see on how you utilize your power, how you utilize hip rotation, and how you use that core to push through something. So for here, this is without the suit on. You can see she's weakened the glute. She's got her arms moving through, and she's got pretty decent rotation in that leading hip, that internal rotation. So now we're going to load her up on the suit, and we're going to see what it does for her. Right away, what I see, and this is just having her put the suit on, she's not doing anything different. She's just going through the same movement. Now that she has to push through the force of bands in the arms, and she has loaded in the legs and the posterior chain, she's firing off that back glute to push through. She has a little bit more internal rotation of that leading hip, and she has complete A-line now from the leg up the back. So she's really pushing through that core. She's having to use her power. She's calling on all the core power, and she's having to really extend that arm out. We actually see that she's stretching more because she has that resistance. So it's a functional movement that we've specifically lined up bands. That's the beauty of mass suit, is that you can specifically place the bands in certain positions so that you can have your athlete move and activate certain core muscles. She just put on so much more power with that movement so that when she gets into her sport, she's now able to go through and call on that true core power. So let's go to the next thing here. She was dealing with, when she first came in my office, with a little knee pain. Very typical with water polo players. They get in that egg beater, and their glutes get a little deactivated, and they get a lot of tightness on the outside of the legs. I worked with USA Water Polo for 2 years, and every day, every time they got into a big egg beater day, you'd see it. You'd see the knee pain on the inside come out, and you'd get a lot of tightness on the outside of the legs. They also did not work the glutes very much while they're in the water. So this is what I saw. You see the midline here with the yellow, and you can see right away that she's loading on the right hip more, and that she is shifting away from her left knee. So that's where she's having the pain, is on the left knee. So what that tells me as a practitioner is that something is going weakness in that left hip. So we're going to put her in the suit, and this is, again, not doing any therapy before or after. This is just putting her right back into the suit, having her go through the same overhead squat movement, and right away you can see that her midline, she's a lot more centered. All we did is we put the yellow band here, between here. It activates the glute muscles, the glute med, or really good rotator cuff of the hip. And then she's also having the bands on the back, which is creating better posture, better activation of that posterior chain. So right away you're going to see that she's a lot more centered. Her knee is not turning out as much, and that hip is being activated. This is a simple movement. I did not have to load her with any weights. I put the suit on, I snapped in the bands, and she had that hip activate, and she's centered. It really showed how it's able to center that athlete. A lot of hip activation movements we could do in the suit. This is one of my favorites. It's a shoulder protocol, mass shoulder, we're going to call it. One thing about shoulder protocols is that when you're doing simple band work or static movements, you're activating one muscle group. You're focusing on that muscle group, and you're wanting to activate and focus really good. That's great, but why not activate more of the core while you're working on that muscle group? So what we've done here is we have a band on the inside of the hands. He's doing simple wall walks back and forth in little clock motions. But we also have the red band going from the backside, which is, while he's holding, he's activating serratus anterior. That is the muscle that locks in that shoulder blade so that he can get proper motion in the shoulder. So with the band and the mass suit, we're able to achieve multiple things at the same time. You cut down, your therapy session time, and you're getting a lot more activation of muscle, and he's activating his core, which is nice. Okay, jump training is important for every athlete. I don't care what sport you're in. So we're going to go through how the suit has created, and we'll just take a pause here. So if you're in the weight room and you're going to be doing weightlifting, let's say bench press, and you know that your max rep is 220 or 250, you know that goal is to get up to the 300 or the 330. There's a number involved. It's something mentally that you know that, look, I'm going to push through until I hit that 330. It's something you can achieve. Now, how do we take that and put it onto the field? I'm going to do my 40 faster. I'm going to have a higher vertical. Okay, but how do we increase power output with that same? How do we increase the power output as we're trying to achieve that same goal? And that's where the mass suit really comes in. So, for an example, if you're going to be doing, a leap forward or a vertical leap, your brain knows that you're able to achieve that distance. Okay, so when you put the suit on, in this bottom picture, he knows that he is loading, and he's going to be, let's say, hitting here. Okay, when he puts a suit on, his brain is still saying, I'm going to hit that distance. But his body is now saying, wow, I've got something loading my body here. I've got to work even harder. So he calls on true core power muscles to achieve that same distance. It's pretty fun. His brain is still saying, I want to achieve that distance. I want to get to that place. So what he does is he's calling a lot more into the posterior chain. He sits back into his glute a lot more. He's lowering his glute into his heels, and he's able to explode with a lot more power to achieve the same distance, and he does. So with this one, he's a little weak on his explosion, and on the one above, because he has his arm strapped in and his leg strapped in, he's having to explode with a lot more force, and he achieves the same thing. You can only imagine what that does when he takes the suit off after working out like that. The same thing on the vertical. So this is him, and he doesn't have the suit strapped in. This is his first time. He has a little bit of a right hip weakness. You can see how his knee dives in as he's exploding. He's used to that, so he's going to explode with that right hip that kind of goes in a little bit, and he's going to get his vertical. What we see with that is we'll show it in the next slide, but he achieves a rotation as he's going up. His body naturally wants to rotate because of that weakness. Now we take the suit, and yeah, his lower back is not as flat as I'd like it to be because it's his first time in the suit, but he's incorporating and he's trying to recruit as much as he can so that he can, his height is a certain height. He wants to achieve that, so he's going to call on a lot more power to achieve it. And what we see is this neat little diagram here. This is without the suit, and this is with the suit on. With the suit off, he's got a rotation, and he's Just like if you're in for catching a ball in flight, he's got a little bit of rotation, and yeah, he gets a lot higher. But as we see with the suit, his body is in full extension, and he's recruiting a lot more muscle because he's suspended from above to below. He doesn't have a lot of rotation, which is great because he's a lot more stable for catching and for landing as well. And that's also something that was pretty amazing, is as the athlete was going through either the vertical or the leap forward, we were seeing that their awareness of their body is heightened because they're loaded. They don't want to land without stability. So they were a lot more aware of that landing. So when they were landing, they had their base underneath them. They weren't getting over their knees. They weren't getting into their toes. They made sure that they were landing with stability. And that's important for any athlete because we see a lot of ACL tears or MCL tears because you're landing with an unstable surface. So this is another example of how he was able to achieve more power output with the leap forward. The top picture shows him hyperextending and creating a hyperextension almost of his back to achieve that velocity forward. With the suit on, he was loading so much more that he has a lot more of an A-line. So that protects his core. He's using a lot more of that core as he's exploding forward. So that was just another finding we had. So overall, the mass suit, it is another tool. It's not going to replace the gym, but when you're on the road, if you're at the house and you don't have access to a beautiful gym, why not utilize a piece of equipment that you can achieve a lot more power? You can have a lot of functional movement with a load, and overall we can see a lot less injury because of the suit. We're going to talk a little bit about injury prevention. When we're talking about sports and where an athlete is in their specific time frame, you watch a lot of professional athletes, they'll go through their season and they have a maintenance. They're constantly maintaining, they have their recovery, then they get off season and they have their strengthening season. They want to rebuild for the next season. We see a lot of young athletes today epidemically getting injured, and it's a lot of repetitive stresses they're putting on their body without a lot of balance. They don't have somebody to do checks and balances just like a professional athlete. So the mass suit has been a great tool for me in my practice to really see imbalances and touch on those and be able to tell the athlete, look, you're in your stabilization phase, or what I call my stabilization phase, before we get into the strength and power endurance. You're not able to hold a position statically, and it really exposes that with the mass suit. It's a pretty amazing tool that way. So when I'm looking at an athlete and saying, do we need to move forward or do we need to step back a moment, it's nice to have a tool that allows you to make that judgment with a little bit more exposure. And I like to use that word exposure because you really are exposing a weakness. Just like the example I used earlier, we had somebody that had a hip weakness for water polo. They are having knee pain, and yes, they're having pain in the knee, but is it truly coming from that? No, it's coming from that hip. And when they put that mass suit on, you can see how the hip is activated and it goes right back into proper position. Now our goal from that is to take that education that we learned from that and stabilize the hip so they can get back without the mass suit. Again, it's another tool. It really helps us point out the insufficiencies in the movement, and so that we can help that athlete move forward, get more power, get more strength, and not break down. And that's the whole goal of it, is we want to take these young athletes, we want to empower them so they don't get injured and really find what that weakness is telling us.